Javier Montana is from Photogenia. He's a professional photographer focusing on corporate headshots, but spending a lot of his time out in nature doing all kinds of photography. So I thought he could come in today and tell us how to take better photos. Hello.
Hi, Ashwin. Thanks for having me here.
It's good to have you and your expertise on this subject. Overall, before we get started on tips, is there any general advice you would give to the amateur?
I guess the main thing is try to put a bit of emotion and an element of surprise into the composition and the picture. Sometimes we focus maybe too much in posing and preparing again and so on. So sometimes getting that element of surprise, a bit of emotion, a different angle, gives that little touch of a special photo that we'll enjoy later on.
I think we can talk about those two elements, emotion and surprise, as we go through the techniques. For instance, I was going to ask you about posing. You just implied that sometimes that can take away the surprise. So maybe let's go through the elements of a good photograph, starting with the composition of it. Can you explain what composition is and some rules we can follow?
I guess for me, the main rule would be to get some sort of a focus point, a reference point. Good photos are the ones that have an element of simplicity. And when you look at them, your eyes go straight to a focus point, and there is not many distraction areas. So first, go look around you and see what you're trying to photograph. Sometimes the mistake is trying to put too many things, too many backgrounds, too busy things. And sometimes it's simplicity and focus to a specific area gives that a special touch to a photo.
Does that mean we need a special lens to focus in on the subject and that will blur out the background?
That's an option, but to do that normally you need professional equipment and so on. Saying that, some mobile phones now can provide that. But yes, that blur at the background gives that special effect and highlights the subject. But with normal phones, you can still take a lot of good photos and highlight what you want to take the photo of and avoid the distractions.
So the first lesson is find a focus point, cut the clutter as much as you can. When we say cut the clutter, does that mean just have 1-2 things in the background? Do you have an approach to backgrounds?
It's hard to say, but good photos don't have clutter, as you say. And simplicity, in my opinion, is the key. So when you take a photo of a person, an animal, a pet, or whatever, don't just look at the thing you're trying to take the photo. Look at the background. Backgrounds are so important and can make or break a good photo.
Do you have tips about good backgrounds, like repetition, block colors, anything you like to see in a background?
A good background for me is a combination of texture. Sometimes too much definition, if you're trying to take a photo of a person, is not good. So a touch of blurriness, a combination of colors, sometimes distance. I think there is not a straight rule, but the main thing, again, as I said before, is backgrounds are important, but make sure that they don't take over.
Okay, so say you're at the family table, someone asks you to take the photograph. You should choose the background wall carefully, because some walls will be more interesting, more useful as a background than others. And also you should choose the angles carefully. Just take us into that scenario of what you would do in the family photograph as an amateur if someone asked you to take that photo.
First rule, position the people a little bit. I know it takes a bit of extra time, but there is nothing worse than having a group of people that one is half a meter apart from the other one is 2 meters. So try to group them somehow together. Secondly, let's go back to the background. If there is some sort of a column or painting or whatever, just position yourself or the camera or even the group in a way that background doesn't pop up and create that distraction. And finally, get close to the action. Many times we lose what you call canvas at the back. So frame them up, don't leave too much space left, right and center and top and bottom, because you're losing sometimes a lot of emotion and a lot of detail. So get close to the action.
You're listening to Javier Montana from Photogenia, giving us some photo tips, starting with the family photograph around the table. So bring them together, bunch them together, find a good background. What about posing? Say you are doing a slightly posed photograph. People don't know how to stand, do they? Can you give us some posing tips?
We all get a bit threatened in front of a camera, even if it's a mobile phone, myself too. So the first thing I suggest is please avoid rigid positions. You know, when we see cameras again, our body gets stiff. We sometimes even slow the way you breathe and so on. So make sure your people moves, it doesn't get rigid, and then avoid some sort of a stiff, straight positions. You know, people can put hands in the pockets. If they're a family, they can put their arm one on top of the other. You know, they can hug together. So make sure people doesn't freeze. Freezing a little bit is your enemy. And then take lots of photos. In some of them, somebody will be blinking, and some others will be looking away. But make sure that people doesn't freeze. You join them together, take lots of photos, and one of them will be a winner.
You talked a little bit about focusing on a subject and ignoring the background, but in some cases, the background tells the story of who the person is. Like if they're a sugarcane farmer, the sugarcanes will help tell that story. Is there a way we can actually use the environment to enrich the storytelling of the photo?
Absolutely. That's a very good example, the one you're putting. So putting, it's what you call commercial photography, and sometimes in a professional world, but putting a subject in their context, could be a farmer, could be a policeman, could be any professional. It's very important, the background, to show who he is or who she is, what they do, and what are they focused. So how do you position that person in that background? Possibilities are endless. You know, sometimes there is a rule that says put the subject in the front, in the middle, and put the whole background around. That could be very dramatic, especially if you have the subject close to the camera. Sometimes it's better to put the subject in a corner so it doesn't distract fully. So there is the different variations, and if you're not sure, try both. Try different angles, a bit higher, a bit lower, left, right, and center. And once you see the photos in the computer and the phone, you can pick up the right one.
Okay, just experiment, take lots of photographs. How about lighting? We're in the middle of summer, lots of bright, high sunlight hitting us. How can we use lighting to take better photos?
I guess there is a few things to consider. I always like what you call the golden light. Golden light is normally the one you get early in the morning, the first hour, and then late afternoon, the last hour of the day. Try to avoid the middle of the day. Light is harsh, very strong, and especially if you have the subject or the person looking at the camera, light is very strong. People is just making funny faces and so on. So if you have no option but to use with harsh light in the middle of the day, put the sun, put the light behind the subject. I know it's sometimes something you haven't been told, but avoid the light in the face of the subject, put the light behind. And then if you can, try to use early mornings, late afternoon. Light is warmer, softer, and you'll create much better results.
Okay, so that's a good tip. Golden light, let the sunset or even early sunrise perhaps help you out with the photography. How about some creative lighting effects? Say it's nighttime, there's a street lamp, you position the subject in front and the street lamp creates a halo behind the person. Can you just tell us some creative ways to use artificial or natural lighting?
Yes, as much as I can, I avoid using flash, and I like to use any available light. Sometimes will be the sun, sometimes will be the moon, sometimes will be something on the street. So if you're in the street at night, telephones are so good today. You can take photos almost in any light. And that touch of light in a corner, it could be a street light, it could be a neon sign advertising something, or it could be even a car or traffic light, can create that touch of light that makes the whole photo pop up.
What about subjects? What would you say makes for an interesting subject?
Good question. I think it sometimes could be the subject itself, if it's something very unusual, but many times it's the light, it could be the angle of the photo, or it could be the expression, if that subject, if you're talking to a pet or a person or whatever. So when you put a few of these things in a row, and you create that sort of emotion, I get back to the word emotion because in photography that's the key. If you see a photo that doesn't give you a sense of emotion or a sense of happiness, I think it's not a good photo. So when you get a few of these things, as I said before, in a row, expression, angle, light, a combination of those, you get that special photo.
Is there an X factor beyond those techniques? Are some people just good at finding emotion in the shot?
That's critical. I do a lot of corporate photography, and even in corporate photography, I do events and many things. Always look for emotion. There is nothing worse than a person looking at the camera or telephone, serious and so on. Action is good. Could be talking, it could be singing, it could be discussion, it could be an argument between person, or if you go to pets or other situations, that emotion has to be there.
So to be a good photographer, you have to be good with humans. You have to learn how to break the ice and get them to come out of that rigid shell.
Critical. As I said before, when we look at cameras and they are in front of us, we all get a little bit stiff and so on. So I guess a lot of the job of a photographer is to make people feel relaxed and make people feel comfortable in front of the camera, that they don't feel threatened and so on. So a lot of the photos I do in professional life, but later on in holidays and so on, my job is to make sure that the people doesn't feel threatened,
Yes.
that the people trust you, and that the people at the end of the day can see the photos and be reasonably comfortable with what they see.
Yeah, I think that's a good tip. It's similar sometimes in radio when a guest comes in and is nervous. And I think the reason they get nervous is they think about the audience. They think of this big crowd, where it's much simpler if they just think about me and them talking in a studio alone. So sometimes the job of a radio presenter is to make them forget that they're on radio. And maybe with a photographer, forget I'm here, forget there's a camera. Let's just be real and be back to normal life.
Absolutely. And I live that every day. People comes to my studio, or I go to some businesses, and you wouldn't believe how stressed, how stiff people can get. And my job again is to make sure that in a few minutes I could make that people feel comfortable. But in a holiday mood is a bit different. People tends to be a bit more relaxed as well. So you may have an opportunity to do things in a holiday situation that are different than in the corporate world.
Take advantage of the season. Any final tips you can leave us with?
Look, first of all, try to take photos, and good photos. They are good memories, as I said before, but don't forget that you're on a holiday. So try not to get too obsessed or too stressed about taking photo. I just came myself from a holiday right now. I've taken a lot of family photos, and I always was telling myself, take photos, but don't make sure that your holiday is overtaken by the photography. Also, try to look at different angles of the same thing. Sometimes if you take photos of kids, just don't take the photo of the kid. Go to the angle, go down, go at a level. Take lots of photos, delete the ones you don't like. Sometimes avoid the harsh light, as I said before. Try to use the golden light. Play with the element of surprise. Sometimes you have a stage of photos, but sometimes if you trust your family or the people you have around you, you just turn up, take the photo. You never know what you're going to get. So try to be a bit creative, and then the results will come.
Beautiful advice, very comprehensive. Javier Montaner is from Photogenia, and thank you, Javier, for coming in today.
Thanks for having me, Ezrin.